So let's see. Okay. So before I start drawing, let me actually even just talk to you guys about where my mind is going, all right? Where's a good place to buy skull replicas? Go to boneclones.com. This is a real skull. All right, let's place in. And I'll zoom in a little bit actually, so you can kind of see where I'm starting. And I do apologize again if I do miss a bunch of questions, but I am now looking down and drawing a little bit, and I'll look back up and read some of the questions again in a minute. He's gonna have glowing eyes inside. Do apologize if the voice starts to get a little bit hoarse as I talk. I'm not naturally built to project and speak aloud. So when I teach classes at Art Center, at the end of the day, I'm usually spent, like my voice is gone, because it takes a lot of energy for me to actually project my voice. So if it's a little bit faint right now, I'll keep trying to project more. How's it going, Jen? Welcome. And anybody who's joining right now internationally, different parts of the country, again, welcome. I appreciate you guys stopping by. I'm sure it's early or late for a lot of you, but thanks for choosing to spend time here with me and with everybody else, where you have a lot of other options of streams or content that you can look at. But like I said, hopefully you guys have got something from this a little bit for yourself. I started this practice of drawing 10,000 figure drawings and did it in 50 drawings every day. I have learned a lot. Is it too much of one thing I did? No, it's amazing. If you really did that many drawings, fantastic, congratulations. Keep it up as much as you can, but don't burn yourself out. You know, the way I treat these kind of live streams, I understand there's a lot of things I could set up here. And I know I'm probably making things a lot harder for me than I need to. But I treat them very much like how I treat my classes, where I want to re-explain, answers. I want to talk about things again when people ask certain questions that have been asked before. Because it's one thing to hear a reply that's very kind of like standard, but I think you need to hear it from the words from the individual who's said it before, because I think it's different in how you take it. I know some things can be very much just factual information, just be like point A to point B, but a lot of things I'm also not just about technical, but how I just feel about them. Even if when people ask about tools, it's like, what pen are you drawing? I understand that's a very common question, and there are certain facts and things I've replied to, but I don't mind talking about them because I love talking about tools. I love talking about techniques of that kind of, different things to look at and try and experiment with, because yes, I am that much passionate about those things too, But like I said, if for some of you who have asked questions, if I missed them, just try to ask again. I don't always catch all of them, and some questions I have to either move on from or consider the importance of others as well. So IG is Peter Han Style. He's gonna have his arm up like this. You know what? He's gonna carry a light right down here, almost as if he's guiding somebody. Ah, okay. So a new idea. So I had this character with a head coming up with a skull. He's gonna be in robes and a bunch of like interesting cultural elements. He's gonna be holding some kind of light system, and he's have another character here following him. So it's almost like he's guiding him through something, kind of like the River Styx character, right? The boatman. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Oh yeah, you know, as you're saying, part of streaming is repeating yourself a lot, and I'm very much used to that because the classes I teach are fundamental based, so I have to repeat things over and over and over again on the lessons of what I'm teaching. So you know, a lot of my friends tell me it's like, aren't you bored of that class anymore? It's like after teaching it for 10 years, dynamic sketching at Art Center or other places, don't you tire of talking about the same subject matter over and over and over again? Don't you get tired of drawing the same thing over and over and over again? And I don't, because I like drawing those things, but also I find new things about them, about how to approach it, or the story behind them, the biology, the functions, the history, the culture, and it makes me curious about other stuff as well too. So that's why I really favor the class that I teach, because it's constantly stimulating me with new ideas. But I grow and learn from the students too. As people see it the way uniquely and how they see it, it alters my perspective also. So, a question from Talimera is, do you think one should buy a simple drawing table as a beginner? Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm just using an IKEA table for my computer and drawing surfacing. I don't have fancy, you know, space within my apartment, or having, you know, all these like drawing tables and areas. I even just draw on the couch. I'll even draw on my bed. I just sketch anywhere I want to. Sometimes I'll just step out of my house and I'll go to like a cafe and I'll draw there. Um, so yeah, it's always something that I'm altering. Would I recommend something like that to set up for yourself? Of course, even if it's just a basic one. Any location you can actually have a place to feel comfortable to just start drawing and creating, please. But there's no shortcut at that point. It's just being able to put yourself in a position to always find a way to practice. And add to, I'm not saying I don't dream. I'm just saying I don't really remember them. You know, for people that do dream, I'm actually very envious about them, because they have so many crazy images and stuff like that. And I've talked about this in the stream before, but my dreams, and if I do remember them, are extremely mundane. It's literally me dreams of like standing in line at a store, you know, dreams of like being at a museum, walking around. It's usually connected to something I did today. uh, so it's probably just using memory of the experience that I haven't actually gone through, obviously. But references are highly important. Okay. What's an exercise you would suggest to an average artist? Well, being able to just um, control your tools in a more competent way. Muscle memory. And muscle memory is like just physical exercise. Constant repetition, lines, circles, shapes. Being able to control them consistently, to produce the same line, to produce the same shape over and over and over again. Where then eventually becomes second nature, and you don't have to sit there thinking about what it is and how you need to do it, but your hand just does it. Out of curiosity, I'm sorry. What's the toughest thing you came to realize in your years of teaching at Art Center or anywhere else? Um, it's a tough question, actually. It's a good one too. But in terms of the toughest thing I came to realize was actually very early on, was how do I make what I'm teaching my own thing? Because when I taught in the beginning, this method that I'm teaching right now came from a different individual, my instructor, my mentor, and he taught this for many number of years. And so when I took it with him at Art Center, obviously I learned a lot, and I followed him and you know, taught with him, TA for him many times, and you know, got approval from him to be able to take the class out, but it was still always his method, you know. And every time I taught it, I thought about how would he say, you know, explain this? What would he draw? What would he say in response to those questions? So my mind was always trying to put myself in his situation or his place. But that's not the way to do it, because I am not him. I'm not my mentor. And no matter how good he was, or, you know, like I said, as an example to other people, he was very influential, especially in our area of the community of Art Center. He was very popular. So after his passing, you know, all I could really think about was, like, I want to make sure I do him justice, so that people that ask me questions or interact with me feel like I know what I'm talking about, right? So those were some of the self-doubts and fears that I had teaching earlier on when I was only 28. I started teaching at 28, 29, you know? This is in 2010. So 10 years ago. And I'm 38 right now. So in my late 20s, did I want to teach? It didn't matter. That opportunity fell on my lap because my mentor was killed. So now I have to, like, take it or don't. I can't say no. Art Center said, hey, can you teach his class for us? You knew him. You knew this process. So in the beginning, for the first year, that's how I taught. You know, it's like, what would he do? What would he say? How would he draw this? But people can see through that instantly. The students can tell. It's like, man, you know, this, it shows the insecurity. And what, you know, everyone's being nice and everyone's following along, and you know, they're listening. But that's the same thing. It's like, in my mind, I see it very differently, you know. But I had to be able to overcome that. And the way to overcome it was to accept the fact that this was not teaching what Norm would have taught or how he would have said things. I gotta now do it the way I want to do it, you know. So yes, the fundamentals, the foundations of what I'm teaching are part of his foundations that he established, which I call the echo of my mentor, the echo of Norm. But now this is my class. This is how I teach things. This is how I need to explain it. But I learned a lot from that. Do I still do the thing where I pretend to be the student the first day? No, not anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Because a lot of the students that come into Art Center are like 18, 19. I don't look 18, 19 years old anymore. I know I look young. Everyone says, like, man, you look so young than your age. But I don't look like an 18-year-old, you know? So I can't just sit there and be like, oh, where's the instructor? It doesn't work. And everybody kind of knows at Art Center who I am now. So a lot of the students that come in are already like a second, third year. So they already know about my class. Do I mainly draw, or do you also paint or other techniques? I do. So when I work on actual contract jobs for companies, I actually mainly do digital. Digital painting, digital drawing, because change needs to happen very fast. And usually every year I work on about 3 or 4 projects. This last year, 2019, I worked on an animation. I worked on a couple video games. A lot of them are still in development, so they're under NDA, so I can't share any of that stuff. But so yeah, I still work professionally now. Well, here's the thing, Taivu, is that I may look young enough now, but with Asians, you get to a certain age and then you do wrinkle up, right, like crazy. It becomes like the whole Indiana Jones scene where the guy's, you know, drinking from the the cup of Christ, the Holy Grail, and then he turns into a husk, right? But you know what though, you know, it's different now, because the Asian people that we see as old is our previous generation, our parents and grandparents. But my generation, us in our 20s and 30s, we're going to be different when we get older. We might not shrivel up like our parents did. Do you do any personal work that primarily has an emotional motivation behind it, like an attempt to capture a feeling or interpreting a past experience through your art? So yeah, my recent graphic novel that I wrote and drew pulls from my previous experiences, from mentorships to from teaching to authoritative figures. My mentor, you know. So the story actually does pull from that, which I'm very emotionally connected to. Yeah, Norn's book is awesome. I'm glad you have that. Draw is to see, and you can get it on blurb.com. Essentially, it's a collection of just Norm's work. When he passed away, friends got together, scanned a lot of his work, and we just produced an art book. It's not instructional, but it does have a lot of great drawings in them. It's called To Draw is to See on blurb.com. So I don't know about salt and pepper hair. I'll probably lose my hair if anything else. I just saw a photograph of my grandfather just recently, a couple days ago. My dad is in town. My grandfather passed away in 1988, long, long time ago. And he was already in his 80s, so a couple of my grandparents were very old. But he was bald, so I'm pretty sure I will be. Some to sub, did you get to try the Pilot Falcon and Labo? I haven't, but I do have this one, which is digital while you're drawing traditionally. They should be used in conjunction. Come on. Get the flow. Let's make paper towel. It kind of dried out a little bit at the end, so that's why. Okay, there we go. Broko's, this is a question from New and gesture drawings look like every one of his lines was meant to be. That question was given to me from Terada, Katsuya Terada. And I asked him the question of like, you know, as you're placing down a line, how do you know where the next line is going to go, right? It seems like it's very natural, like you already know where everything is. Well, his answer was it made sense to me because as he verbalized it, it was kind of the way I felt. And how he said it was when he puts down a line, the line represents a letter or a word. You know, it could be a word, and each line then naturally goes together because using word character over here. And I had this really fun little character I drew in this book, which was like a little fun piratey character. So I'm gonna put him in here also. Do I use Procreate? I do, absolutely. It's a great program. I love the iPad. I've used it professionally. I use it personally. When you say you do animation, is it hand-drawn or CGI? When I say I've worked on animation, I mean I've done the visual development for it, the designs for the animated stuff. I worked on animated film, what is it? Actually, no, not last year, 2 years ago now. It was all early previs, blue sky stuff, character design work, just early development previs. But it's all, you know, it's all hand-drawn. A lot of it was on paper. Then I moved to digital. Do I have any courses that I could learn from Dogload? I do. If you go to my behind me on my wall, I use it mainly for my classes. But personally, do I use it a lot? Not necessarily. But is it a great tool to learn from? Especially the idea of impermanence, of letting go of drawings. You can do that here also. It's like this drawing right now that I'm doing. It's not gonna last. I'm just having fun with it to show, to share with you guys. It's not design, and I'm not creating it for something of an illustration or a final piece. It's just drawing for the sake of drawing, just to have fun. And if you can't just have fun drawing, well, working. So this drawing has no intention and purpose of being used for something. So you got to be able to find those moments in time during the day where you can just sit and just draw because you want to. Not because you feel like you have to, or somebody's asking you to for a class or a requirement, or because you're sitting there trying to prerequisite finish a lesson to understand more things and fundamentals without having any of that in place. Just to draw. So Shemi asks, have you ever done a drawing you couldn't believe it was you who did it? Not necessarily. Because as artists, we all can understand that we always have certain pencils, 2H and 6B. I don't feel the difference in the darkness. Is it because of the technique or the qualities of it's got to be something really, really good, Because that already limits you in your performance. So you see how I did that right there? All this stuff. So then people will be like, shoot, that's not what I wanted. I want the sword right there. So, I gotta start it over, right? But I didn't in this situation. How did I actually problem solve this? Well, I thought to myself, he's not a very good pirate. He's not a broken one. Because he's not a very good, I guess, fighter or adventurer. He has the worst stuff, right? There was that one character from a movie I saw a long time ago. I don't even honestly remember what it is, but I remember what he had. And he had... I forgot what that was from. A certain character, I think from a movie. This very ethereal character is riding on mist and clouds and smoke. And this is how I can close in the image. Whereas I get to the bottom of the page, I can use effects to make it feel like a complete drawing. I don't like going off the page, so I'll use things like this to help me contain it in the page. Sorry, I think there's something on the nib that's... Okay, now that I've established everything I need to, he's gonna have a glow right there. I'm gonna start to kind of push some darks and separate some elements. No, it's this particular pen. The other one works just fine. I think I just let it sit out and dry a little bit too much. And because it's such a flex into it, I have to kind of push some water through it later on. I gotta flush it out. It's also brand new, so I just haven't used it enough. So you can see the flow working a lot smoother on this particular pen. But because this is extreme flex, the amount of ink flow, it's not as smooth, but that's the payoff of flex pens like this. Also, when I tend to kind of move really fast, pens can't really keep up. Usually, when I move quickly, I use things like fine liners. Fountain pens, that's why they skip a little bit, because I just tend to move a little bit quicker. So if I move slower, then the line will be a lot more consistent. Alright, let's start to pump some darks into this, and I'm going to zoom in a couple of areas. Let's start with the main, with the character on top. Some of the areas of the inner cavities, I'm going to push dark a little bit. Good question from Sarah. Am I arrogant for believing I can be better than my peers at art, or is that just being competitive? I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking that way, but what you don't want to have is this animosity or even the want to squish others, to step on others so that there is a dog in the back. She is resting on the ground. You can hear the little chain dingling every now and again. It's a golden retriever. Her name is Cola, and she's very old, 15 years old as a golden retriever. She can barely see. She's deaf, and she has bad hips. But she's living the last of her lives with me. Appreciate that. Thank you, Matthew. Well, the vet already told me that she's got about 5 months left, based on their judgment. I think she'll live a bit longer, but she's lived a good life. She wasn't my personal dog. She was my girlfriend's dog that was in Asia, and we brought her over on the plane as a 14-year-old dog, and she made it really well. But and the reason why she's over here is because her caretaker had a stroke in Asia and couldn't take care of the dog. So they asked if I would take care of the dog because I had space. And I said I would. So she's staying with me until her last remaining years, or last remaining time. This 2020 will probably be her last year, most likely. We'll be doing more streams in the future. The streams will always be free on Twitch. I don't know if I'll be streaming on multiple different platforms at once, depending on how the rules are established by Twitch. I'm not sure exactly. There are a lot of things I'm very ignorant about when it comes to live streaming here on Twitch. And right now, some people are watching me on YouTube. Some people are watching me on Facebook. So we'll see how it goes. For the future, yes, subscribers will have access to all my previous streams, which are going to be archived and placed up there. And all the live sessions like this will always be on Mondays and Thursdays. The Monday version will be in the evening Pacific time. I'm going to change the Thursday to be maybe in the daytime so that people international can also watch that too. But, this is just to support, the things I'm doing, because this is a part of my job, really. As well. She works in animation, but I want to keep her name protected, so I'm not going to share anything else as to who she is. I keep a lot of personal stuff under wraps. I don't put it out there on social media. People say online social media stuff is invasion of private life, but to be honest, you control what you put out there, so I don't mind, putting my own life out there, but I don't put other people's lives out there. Do you remember the last time you drew with the pencil? I did. And actually, let me just show you the pencil that I've used. It's a tool I would recommend. You can find them in certain art stores. Noodle, in terms of having a Patreon or Discord, I'm hoping at some point soon. I just been kind of dealing with so much. I just do the live streams, but like I said, Discord will be great for a lot of you guys in studies and whatnot. Respect for doing pieces that kind of like, I don't know, bring awareness to it. We've gone about 2 hours. We're going to be going about a half an hour more. No matter how far I get to this piece, I usually cut the streams off at 2.5 hours. So if I don't get it done, I'll finish it later on and I'll post it. Yes, I did spray fixative, matte. How does it feel to have the ability to draw whatever you want? Well, to be honest with you, even when I was in school at Art Center, I was able to draw whatever I wanted because I would look at the things and draw them. And it was very much based on the class that I was taking. Now, there are some things that were more difficult to draw. Even though I can draw many things, that doesn't mean every single one of them are easy, you know? For me, when I was younger, landscapes and exteriors were very tough to draw. So it took me a lot more time to develop those shots. Over time, it got easier. Even within subject matters, I found human form to be very tough. Like we would do a lot of anatomy study and gesture studies and proportions and doing graphite and charcoal study. Figure drawing in general, when I was a student, was hard. But I can draw the figure. But like I said, as a student, there were some things that were much more strenuous and more time consuming or more mentally draining because I had to focus so much. And even now, you know, I would say there are certain things that would definitely push me. Even though I can draw them, there's something that require much more focus than others. So how did you learn environments? By going outside and drawing real environments, you know? Every time I go like on traveling or hikes or just going outdoors, even especially when I was in school doing classes, we would do landscape paintings, landscape drawings. Understanding perspective is a part of that. Knowing how to compose, how to play with scale, where to place details from the front, you know, leaning towards the back, getting a sense of depth, you know, using all those elements. In drawing, you're limited to a line, which makes it much tougher in my opinion. So with line ink drawing to do landscapes is very hard because you got to make proper choices as to what you want to place in. With painting, you know, some things, you have a lot more options based on the fact that you have value, color, simplistic strokes and planes and shapes, and some things can be done with a single stroke. Where with the line work, like if you want to push dark value to light value, you got to fill it with hatching like this, and so it's really tough to balance out those values because of it. With drawing is also much more time consuming. If figure drawing was hard, what came easier for you back then? Things like animals. I loved creatures. I liked mechanical things like vehicle shapes. The things that weren't necessarily the actual figure itself. Even though I drew characters a lot of them were based on more stylized kind of figurative work. But when you're asking like real, like representational figure drawing or portraiture, I was never really that great at it. I struggled through those. They were tough. Has anyone asked yet about the paper in the sketchbook in front of you? What kind is it? This is from a company called Bosner, Boesner. It's a company based in Austria, and they make sketchbooks and pencils and tools and all that sort. It's a big brand in Europe. Not really available in the US, unfortunately. Any tips of learning perspective? Learn the rules of perspective, right? The basics of the rules. Do you understand, you know, the idea of a picture plane, being able to establish your horizon line, understanding the different points of perspective of vanishing points, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, you know, understanding how to actually draw base shapes within a plane to make it feel three-dimensional optically. Using eraser is perfectly fine. Have I ever drawn from Google Maps? I have actually. That's a great way to draw landscapes. Use Google Maps, bring yourself down to the perspective of the area, move it around, find the perspective of a shot, and draw from that. That's a great tool. Only problem is it's all stuck within one perspective of the camera. You can't raise it up or go lower. It's all one view, you know. The time right now in the US is 10 p.m. Pacific time. Sten, in terms of, are you drawing based on stories that you make before you draw? Well, not really. This character I drew before in a previous sketch. So that previous sketch was... Where'd it go? This one here. It was a character like a pirate, and he found like a treasure chest, and he's got like his crazy, you know, ghost-like characters around it. So, did I intend to use this character as I drew this one? I didn't. I started drawing this character first, and because I had that already character established, I decided to bring him in. So it was all kind of done on the fly. Aside, in terms of, you know, with your pieces with color, such as like watercolor and whatnot, with the tech series, do you hold back on drawing details knowing you'll paint it later? Absolutely. Not just even tech details, but the amount of hatching I'll do. Right now, the amount of hatching I've done, it creates less opportunity to place in a lot of watercolor for me. So amount of discipline and study into the Dynamic Bible, can they get good enough to draw wherever? There's no guarantee that you'll feel 100% confident within a certain amount of time. But if it was an unlimited amount of time and you were very disciplined, how long it took me when I first took the class at Art Center to feel even comfortable drawing many things? About a year, solid. Drawing every single day, 1 year. And this is back in Art Center when I was 23 years old, because I took the class at 22, and I took the class twice, and I TA'd for it once. So I was with my instructor for a year solid, drawing in that technique at Art Center. Only at the end of that year I felt somewhat comfortable. Can you tell when you know that you are good enough at gesture drawing? Yes and no. You know, it's the idea that when you place down lines or a shape or indication of details, and it just like feels right to you, you know? It's like that with gesture drawing also. You don't get it all the time. It's really hard to keep it consistent. Here's a way to look at it. If I did a small thumbnail of this drawing, and then I redrew it again, do both, okay? So while you're drawing, do other stuff in 3D as well. You know, find ways to balance your time that you're also hitting many things. Like I said, you shouldn't compartmentalize and focus all your time on just one thing for that entire month or two. Do one thing and then migrate to another, and see if you can actually bridge them together. You know, as you draw things two-dimensionally, bring them into a three-dimensional piece. CVS asks, when will the Dynamic Bible be in stock? It was in stock. I already sold through 30 of them. I might only have about 30 more. There are certain artists that I feel have this great balance of hatching but also moving with the ink. That one particular artist I would say is Heinrich Clay. Okay, so look him up. In terms of his name, you would spell it like this, Clay. Heinrich Clay. Clay, whatever you want to say. Right? Google him. Night, pal. The fountain pen I'm using right now is a Pilot fountain, and the model is the 912. You know what I'm noticing right now too is that the fountain pen is skipping a little bit because I think it's the paper. On that smooth paper it was really, really good, but then on this one it doesn't seem to be gripping on it as well for some weird reason. I'll have to keep testing it. This is the first time using this pen on this particular sketchbook, so I'm noticing a bit of issues here and there in terms of the ability to catch the ink without skipping. But on the other paper it was just fine. Yeah, stuff like that's happening. Let me zoom in a little bit closer, so you can really start to see some of the way the work is being done. So you see the line is skipping a little bit, so it's throwing me off in terms of the hatching. So I'm going to switch it back over to the other fountain pen. Brand. Cottonwood Arts sketchbooks. They sell a brown tone sketchbook that I have my students use at Art Center, and it's the one that we go to. Besides that, Canson also makes one as well. It's a scrapbook. The paper is a bit rougher. I would not recommend craft papers. Don't use craft paper. Craft paper and fountain pens or felt tip pens are a bad combination. Craft paper and pencil is fine. And in terms of the crabs being very organic and being able to breaking them down, that is a challenge. That is why it's up to you to be able to actually attempt to figure out many different ways to understand the primitive shapes behind it. Now, I can show you a version of it, but the problem with that is that you'll try to do what I did, actually do multiple studies. But when you do multiple studies, also try to use different shapes, okay? With the mindset of trying to actually understand how primitive you can make that crab. Again, do you see a square? Do you see a diamond? Do you see triangles? Start with the top view to get the good proportions. From the top view, then try 3/4 shot. I would also recommend extracting individual parts and pieces, like a claw, a leg, and seeing how you would interpret those sections as well. Let me zoom out a little bit. The ink that I am using right now is the Sailor brand ink. I'm testing out a new ink to see how well it works. Because it's pigment based, sometimes I have multiple fountain pens and I let them sit, which is not a good thing to do with that kind of ink. I mean, it's not going to destroy it like other pigment inks, but still, you don't want to do that. So I'm looking for more water-based inks that still have a little bit of water resistance to them. So I'm noticing that Sailor ink does actually pretty good. Do you have any tips for watercolor brush and ink? If you're asking about actual just watercolor, the kind of brushes I tend to use are just water brushes in general, made by Pentel. They're the brush pens that have basically empty housing that you can just put water inside of. I use that for a lot of my watercolor paintings. Any other kind of watercolor brushes you can find are going to be obviously good too. I use the I don't have my watercolors here with me, but I use a specific brand. You can use Winsor Newtons; those are great, you know, lower cost paints. But to be honest with you, when it comes to stuff like that, when it comes to watercolor, my suggestion first is maintain a stronger drawing, and then from there, light washes. Okay, I saw this all over social media, Facebook and whatnot. But I was confused. I had no idea what it was about because I actually didn't research into it. I didn't read about what it was, and it really didn't pique my interest to want to know. And even if I'm ignorant about it and not really quite sure exactly, and that's why I don't want to give my opinion because I just haven't looked into it. I just saw a banana and think, okay, cool. It must be some kind of art thing, which it was, art installation. And people are, I guess, up in arms about it because it's, I guess you're saying it sold for a lot of money. But for me, whether it did or not, I don't care. If people are making a lot of money off of it, great, but I had no actual interest in it, so I didn't look into it. Now if you're asking if that's art or not, I mean, it's all within the eye of the beholder, you know. It's like, I'm not gonna say one thing is it is or is not something, you know. If someone's willing to pay for it and they see it as art, go for it, it's your money. You know, and someone who created it is being successful from it, I'm not going to deny that person wanted to do that either. For me, it's like in the perspective of like, if someone's successful in doing what they're doing, they solve life that way, great, you did it, you know, keep going. And there's always going to be people that gripe and complain and the so-and-so haters, right? But I don't really pay attention to it too much. Problem is not the artist, but it's the people buying it. Yeah, well, you know what? When it comes to the art field, the people with the money or the market dictates trends and popularity of stuff, which again, is now dictated by the people who may have limiting experience and also understanding when it comes to creating art or whatever the case is. Like for instance, would I consider, what I do art? I mean, if I'm showing you something of design, I don't really call it art. I call it design process. I'm problem solving something. Now, does it use of expression? Something that you're trying to say as a statement, maybe. Now, again, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm right. Again, like I said, if there's no message at all, for me, myself, personally, I don't really consider that art, If you're saying it has to be just only based on the material and what it just looks like, for me, any monkey can do that, But if there's a meaning, a context of something behind it, of how you can also interpret it in many different ways, that interpretation is something that I think could be led towards the description of an art form, right? But then there's commercial art, then there's figurative art, and there's many ways you can have subcategories on stuff. But like I said, it's how people also then are willing to spend their money on certain things. And the argument of is then video games art, right? And most people will tell you no. But I think it is, because video games can also have deeper meanings of how you interpret them, And that's an expression of something using that medium. And that game could look simplistic as pixels, or it could be highly rendered, like AAA games. So when there are older generations of artists out there who teach, and they deny students from you shouldn't study anime, you shouldn't study games, it's not art, it's not high concept. To me, that's wrong, It's just a different generation. I think animations, whether they come from whatever country they come from, can also be art. It can be just as deep, if it has to be deep, but it can also be aesthetically pleasing, if it needs to be. Do I use any visualization techniques? Well, I'll try to draw from memory a lot. Sorry, Shaheen, I missed one of your questions. But, I'll draw from observation, and then I'll try to recreate it from memory. So whatever I looked at and drew it as a basic primitive form, I'll try to replicate it again. That's one of the exercises I'll have even students do. Draw from memory. One addition to that is when you draw from memory, try to actually turn it in your head without actually having seen the physical thing. So for instance, if I had the skull and I drew it from this angle of view, and you sketched it, and I took away that object, now I said draw that skull again, but now draw from a different angle. Having seen it now, would you be able to do it? That's a tough exercise, but that's one that I also add to students' exercises. And it's very much based on how you studied it from the first part. Demanchi Dave, if you never use pencil again, I think you're missing out on some things. I still love pencil. I'm not saying you should, you can go about the way you want to, but I think pencil is a great tool. I'm just saying each piece that I create has intention and purpose of what tool I want to use based on what it's for. But I'm not going to say that I just, I also just favor ink. I do, but I think pencil can be great, especially when I want to use it for something. If I do figure drawing, like at workshops and stuff, I'll always use charcoal. Favorite instructional art books? Anything from James Gurney is awesome. Star-Lord, says, what bugs me the most is when people put one dot on a canvas and call that art. Yeah, I would agree. Honestly, I wouldn't find that to be a piece of art. But I mean, but that's where you can argue with me in saying that. But didn't you just say, whatever you create, as long as there's some kind of contextual meaning or deeper meaning, even that could be an art piece? And I'd be like, yeah, I guess that is what I said. So then wouldn't a dot, if that artist was able to express something behind it, couldn't be a piece of high art? Well, that is the argument of fine art, right? And that is why I am not a fine artist. And nor would I ever buy a piece of fine art. I'm more technically driven. I love drawing. I love painting. I love studies of forms and shapes and stories. So that's where my money will go. Books and comics and movies and games and illustrations, fantasy, sci-fi, modern or historical. Anyways, it's at 2:22 right now in terms of how long we've gone. I've focused most of my attention on this particular character at the moment. I will continue potentially just kind of moving down this image. I'll probably hit a few areas in the back dark side here where the light is coming out a little bit. Probably hit a bit more dark areas down here too, but I don't know how much. I mean, I'll go more once we finish with the stream, but other YouTube art creators with same style of art that can inspire us. Stan Mueller, unfortunately, I don't really explore YouTube or Twitch or social media of any type for looking for art instructions. I would look for programs like schools and platforms that artists will use, but I don't necessarily scour through social media to find who would offer that kind of thing. So, you know, the schools I teach at, usually those instructors will maybe go on their own and develop their own stuff. So I could recommend some of those people. So what I would recommend first is look at the schools. So look at places like the Concept Design Academy, Brainstorm School, Schoolism, SVS Learn, New Masters Academy. These are places that you can go to find the different artists that work there. And then looks to see if they've actually developed anything on their own. So Evan Amundason is one of those people too. He teaches with Schoolism, I believe, still, or with other places, but he's a great instructor and also a phenomenal artist for character work and fantastical stuff and historical things. He's very knowledgeable, and I respect his work a lot. And he does Twitch streams, I believe. I gotta follow him, that reminds me. Have you met Jim Lee? I have not. I would like to. And Sarah, if you're still here, I actually did watch one of his streams, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. It was interesting to see him sketch. You know, he's one of those kind of old school guys with a pencil and eraser, and he just draws something, erases it, draws something, erases it. You know, and that's Jim. I really enjoy Jim Lee's old work still. His current new work today, I mean, again, I respect him as an artist and a businessman like crazy, but I don't really buy his work these days anymore. But I still will very much buy his old stuff. Back when he was working on Uncanny X-Men, Punisher, Warzone, man, that old stuff that he did was raw. It's too clean now. That's what it is. So, Lucy, if you have access to Scandinavia, there is also the animation workshop in Denmark, which has classes, and I've done stuff there. I've actually done 2 workshops there a couple years ago. And I love the animation workshop. Denmark is beautiful. That school is amazing, and I would highly recommend it. Yeah, Robocars. I mean, again, I love Jim's old work because of the fact that there's this sense of energy in the characters and the line work that he just doesn't maintain anymore because he cleans it up way too much, I think. But I think it also has to do with the person that he worked with as an inker, you know? The people that inked his line work was different back then. Sarah, yeah, that, and you know, I know you mentioned Akira as a TV series, but do you think Akira is a franchise that should be left alone at this point? Absolutely. I think it should be left at the masterpiece as it is, as the manga, and also the animated film. For other Twitch stream artists, look at Evan Amundsen, and also look at Bjorn Huri. I don't know anybody else who actually does Twitch streams that are my friends personally. Yeah, Barskey is Barscey, I believe. A good way to use value is about being able to separate objects and forms like